Hello, welcome listeners to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast, joining me from his home in the Calgary, Canada area, is a returning guest, Jerry Chong. Welcome to the podcast, Jerry.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Just a quick introduction of Jerry. Jerry was one of my very first guests 8 years ago, episode 41, and this will be episode 900 something 8 years later. And we probably should have done an episode around episode 400, but here we are. We skipped that one. We're just going to do this one. And Jerry is a gay Latter-day Saint living in Canada. He's active in the church. He's a temple worker. He's celibate, which he may talk about the journey of being a celibate gay Latter-day Saint. He is an incredible advocate. He has done more, Ben Shalati's done a lot, but you have done worldwide trainings for local leaders, the stake ward and beyond in Canada, United States, Brazil, and has just been an incredible force for good to help us better support LGBTQ Latter-day Saints. At some personal cost, he may talk about the arrows that he's felt, the unkind comments, as he's been so bold. And we said a prayer before we started, and that Jerry, just updating you on his story, will help you if you're an ally of what you might do in your area. Jerry may help you in your area, be an ally. I think one of the great ways people's hearts change is listening to a gay Latter-day Saint. That's something that us allies can't do. We can't actually share that story. So Jerry can share that story. If you're an LGBTQ Latter-day Saint, our prayer is listening to Jerry will help you. And for all of us, just how we can do better. Jerry may share some of the difficult experiences he's had, and we share those just so when we know better, we do better. But Jerry is one of my heroes. He is a man of great courage, great conviction, serves in the Calgary Temple, and just a remarkable man and one of my heroes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Thank you, Richard. So we met in person August 2018. I'd come to the Affirmations Conference, and you were one of the many people that I had met through Facebook, had long conversations by text, and it was a great meeting you and a whole group of people that we know mutually, a result of coming to Utah and being invited on the podcast. So as a result of the podcast, I shared my personal journey. I'd been a member for 14 years at that point. And throughout my journey, I was baptized in 2004. There were no openly gay or LGBTQ members in the stake, let alone in the city, because that was one of the first questions I asked my bishop is, as I move forward and get baptized, is there anyone that I could speak to about how to navigate as a gay Latter-day Saint? And he said there were, but they weren't comfortable being open and were not willing to meet with me. So for the first 10 years, it was hard learning how to navigate, how to hold conversations, how much you could actually share with other people who are members in your ward or your community or even your friends. I wasn't so much in the closet. I was just apprehensive about coming out to people at church. My nudge and turning point was in 2005. Canada received the same-sex marriage bill. Marriage equality became legal law in Canada, and it was a discussion and subject of church nationwide one Sunday. So that was a hard Sunday for me to sit through, but it gave me an idea of what I would be facing if I continued to remain active. What would happen if I became more vocal, if I became more open and more honest with myself and with Heavenly Father. So that's sort of the jumping off point. So meeting with you and sharing, again, a lot of heartbreaking stories that both myself and other members, both American and Canadian, that I've shared with their permission, has hit home with church leaders. And I don't share them to make you sad for me. I just share them with you so that you know what's really going on in our congregations. 8 years later, stuff is still happening. And it's surprising because we're into 2026 and we should have come a long way, but we haven't. There's still pockets of the church where these conversations about allyship and community and inclusion haven't even begun. So, uh, so I do thank you for inviting me on the podcast 8 years ago. And as a result of the podcast, the first impact was a mutual friend of mine had introduced me to a friend from her ward. So she was in the Ward Relief Society presidency, and she had reached out to me after having listened to the podcast. I shared the podcast with church leaders that I personally knew, church leaders within my stake, and with friends from church. So one friend has shared it with her friend, and as a result, their Relief Society wanted to invite me to do a fireside for the sisters. And I said, I would love to do that, but could you or would you invite another group of sisters from another ward or wards that you are, for awkward conversation, friendly with, that you're familiar with, that your sisters know and would feel comfortable coming to an evening where I could share my thoughts, answer questions, and help them understand what it's like for an adult or for their kids to come out at church, and how to decide what your comfort zone is at church, whether to remain active, to be less engaged, to protect yourself, or to step away for now. So with that invitation, we had over 100 people come to the fireside versus 20 sisters coming to the fireside. We had bishops, high counselors within the stake, and mums from three wards who'd come to the fireside. And I shared with them my personal story of getting baptized and meeting the missionaries and joining the church. And then some of the hard things, like being told by a sister in my ward, you can never come out to people in the church. They won't understand or accept you. And that's a hard one. You're just coming into the church, you're relatively new, and you think you should be honest with yourself and with those around you, because that's one of the covenants we make, is to be honest in our dealings with people. And with that, that's where we began. And the sisters came prepared to ask the hard questions. They did their homework before they came to the fireside. They were open to listening, opening to hearing the hard stuff, and also open to hearing the good stuff. I shared a couple personal stories about serving in the temple. My first day serving in the temple, everyone's curious about your marital status. So here's a short little scenario, and then this will give your audience a sense of who I am. One brother had asked me, "Is Sister Chong here at the temple?" And I said, honest answer, no, she's not. Is she on her way? No, she's not. Are you married? No, I'm not. He was alarmed because I was at that time, so I've been a temple worker for 11 years. And at our temple, I was 54 at the time, and I was the youngest temple worker in Calgary. So they were concerned that this man is serving in the temple. He's not married. He's not dating. He has no prospects. So in the break room on the first day, one of the brothers announces that we need to find Brother Chong a good sister to date and marry as soon as possible.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was my first day of the temple. So I knew those sort of questions were going to come up. So with that, I shared that with the sisters in Relief Society, and they laughed, and they knew they could trust me and that I would be open in what I shared with them. So they came, like I said, they came prepared to ask the hard question. So the first hard question is, what keeps you here in the gospel? I've been a member for 11 years at that point, and it's been tough. It's been good, but it's also been ugly in moments. And I shared with them that it's the love of the Savior, the love of Heavenly Father, knowing that I have a purpose and that I felt prompted to speak up and to make a difference because I didn't have a role model. I didn't have anybody to rely on. And church leaders had no resources. In some areas, they still don't have any resources to call upon. It's very unique to find someone who is LGBTQ, active, visible, outspoken, but knowing where the line is, what you can talk about, what you can't talk about, asking for approval and permission to speak about tough things. So that's where it began. So from there, I heard from a mom from another state. So back for the last 11 years as an advocate, I've been able to reach out to other wards and other states with the endorsement and approval of my stake presidents over the last 22 years. And it's all been well received. I generally send the executive secretary or the stake president, if I have their email address, a letter of introduction confirming that I have the approval and endorsement of my stake president to reach out to you. And if you're comfortable with your counselors, I would enjoy coming to speak with you and share with you thoughts and information that I've gathered over time about how to make it safer for LGBTQ members, inclusion, and sensitivity training for your bishops. And it's been rewarding. It's been rewarding to be able to reach out to leaders and understand that they want to know and want to learn how to have these conversations correct the first time. Because if you're speaking to a parent or to someone on the spectrum, you really do have to get it right the first time. I had it wrong so many times over the first 10 years that it made me question, do I belong here? Is there a place for me? Should I stay? So with that, I write a formal letter of introduction, request a meeting to talk about inclusion, and then I wait. Some meetings take maybe a month to set up. Some take well over a year. And it's not they're putting you off. They're just trying to find a pocket in their time as a stake presidency to give you enough meeting time and to be able to ask intelligent questions. So with that, within the first, say, 3 years of doing the podcast, I had been able to meet with 3 or 4 other stakes and had done bishops training in 2 stakes and statewide auxiliary training, meaning everybody in leadership, including primary, Relief Society, young men, young women's high counselors, coming together as a group of leaders and speaking openly about my journey and the journey of others who don't have a voice to speak up to leaders. And I speak up on behalf of those who would like to reach out to the leaders, but their leaders are not prepared to listen at this time. And that's one of the lessons I've learned as an advocate is patience, is that it may not be the right time and the Lord may not have prepared your audience to be willing to listen, willing to learn, to be compassionate, to show empathy and understanding for all of God's children. And that's been a hard lesson to learn. But I have found that over time that the Lord does prepare leaders to listen. One story about reaching out to leadership is after about a year of emails with the executive secretary and stake president, they gave me a date. I'm pretty good at remembering my appointments, but for some reason that date I got a request from someone in my calling to take care of something and literally missed my meeting by 5 minutes. They wouldn't let me into my appointment. I was disappointed. I was devastated after waiting a year to sit down with the stake presidency. So I approached him again, apologizing for my tardiness, and 6 months later, I got my appointment. A result of that delay and mishap, it was a better time. They felt in that first meeting that their bishops ought to learn firsthand from someone who's experienced positive and negative things at church. My experience through church and my callings at church have always been in leadership. So that's how I cast a wide net of connections and friendships at church, is that they know me through. I've served in an elders quorum presidency. I've been elders quorum president in both an English ward and in the Mandarin branch, Sunday school president in both English and Chinese, ward and branch mission leader. So I'm well versed in the mechanics of our church community and how our wards and branches run. During COVID, I was called into the branch presidency of the Varsity Mandarin Ward and had served in that leadership role for 3 years. So what I want to reassure parents as well as your listeners is that it may feel that you're limited to callings and assignments and responsibilities at church as someone who is queer, but I've been able to fulfill that role. They understand and respect my honesty. They know that I'm responsible and will be proactive in my calling and that I'm engaged in the work. So that's partly how I've been able to reach out to stake presidents within Calgary. A quite humble brag about my work here is we have 8 stakes. Over the last 11 years as an advocate, I've been able to sit down and meet with 7 out of the 8. So that's been great. Recent changes now, within the last 6 months, church policy handbook is a member, again, in this case, an advocate within the church can only speak to and address members within their own stake. So you can't go beyond your stake boundaries. You can't even go beyond your country to speak to stake leaders. So that's limited to the work that I can do now, but I still have impact. As you said in the intro, is that I've been able to reach out to my American friends from, or new friends in the United Kingdom and from Brazil. The bishop in the United Kingdom is part of our ministering group that you had created. And so he reached out to me and said, I'm a bishop in the UK. We don't have any of these conversations that you're having being done here. Would it be appropriate for the two of us to meet over video, and I can learn from you what you've done, what you've impacted, and how to make changes within our church community? So the UK is 7 hours ahead of time from our time here in Canada and in Utah. So I said, I'd be willing to meet with you 8 a.m. your time, 1 a.m. my time, because you can find me because of the time difference. I set my alarm. We had a video conversation for about 90 minutes at 1 a.m. my time. He felt comfortable in the conversation. He felt comfortable asking the hard questions. And his purpose was he wanted to approach his stake presidency to see if they can open up these conversations in the UK. So he went with the information I gave him and the answers to his questions, and he worked with the stake presidency. About 3 months later, he messages me and says, my stake's ready to talk to you. I got an email from the stake, and they understand that the time difference, and they set up a meeting a couple weeks later. So from the first conversation with Ashley to the actual meeting with the stake president, less than 5 months, which is pretty quick and pretty fast. And it was a good meeting. They're very friendly. They called me by my first name, which I prefer, because for 22 years and still now, people have attempted to call me Brother Chong, and I find it very formal. I'd rather even in the temple, I prefer to be called Jerry versus Brother Chong, and most people do ask me or refer to me as Jerry. So within that first meeting, it felt very comfortable speaking with the stake president and its counselors and Ashley in the meeting, and they're very, very open and eager to learn. And because I was new to them, they asked for permission and my comfort level and when they asked tough questions about being celibate, being open at church, how much I hold back about my personal life with others, and things like that. So with that, in the UK, their area for the stake is the equivalent of the entire province of so the next major city is either an hour or 3 hours away. So they travel throughout their area and reach out to bishoprics and branch presidencies in their travels, or with the technology as a result of COVID, a lot of conversations are done by Zoom and video. So that's sort of the benefit that I've noticed as a result of our worldwide catastrophe and critical time in our lives is the technology of Zoom and video conversation has allowed people to have conversations, just like we are having right now. Otherwise, I would be working hard, earning airfare and flying to come see you in your home, Richard. You know that. So that was one thing that came out of the ministering group through Facebook. The second one is an Instagram friend from Brazil. He's a marathon runner. I follow him simply because he does a running selfie as he's running his path before breakfast. He runs 16 kilometers before breakfast and is not winded. And as a result, he said, I'd like to have a conversation with you. Would you be open to having a conversation? And then he followed up with, I'm a stake resident in Brazil. I would like to use it as future training, both here locally in my city and neighboring stakes outside of my city. So with that invitation, I thought that I needed to learn Portuguese overnight to be able to have a conversation with my friend Ricardo. But he reassured me that he speaks English, that the video that he was going to record was going to be translated both in subtitles and voiceover by members in a stake that can do instant translation. So similarly, it was our first real conversation because we've sent text messages over the years, but having a real conversation with people, as in person as you can be, even on video, makes a difference. So he would call me Brother Jerry versus Brother Chong. Again, very friendly, very easy to talk to, very open and understanding. And again, he wanted to have an understanding because in Brazil, this conversation has never happened. And he doesn't know any church leaders in Brazil who's had a resource of someone who has remained active, who's made an impact within his sphere or her sphere in the church community. So with that, we talked about good things, bad things, and how we can improve the environment at church and in the gospel of making it safe for both teenagers and older adults who identify on the spectrum and still want to participate at church. That's been a great experience to be able to reach out. And it was surprising that this would happen because, again, when I started being an advocate back in 2015, I was pretty quiet. Some people have pointed out that I'm an introvert. And I am. But at the same time, when I'm speaking on things that are relevant and things that are passionate, my voice becomes more confident. Over the last 11 years, my voice has gotten bigger by leaps and bounds. I've gotten a better understanding of what I can talk about. Like I said, at church in general, we don't talk about our emotions. We don't talk about the hard things. We don't talk about the ugly things. But with my trust in the spirit of knowing what I can talk about, what I can't talk about, I do. So that sort of brings you up to speed on some of the things that I've been able to do. I'm just going to check my notes right now. On Instagram, I mentioned may have mentioned there was a mom who had reached out to me. She's in a neighboring stake and she had wanted to see things happen in her stake. And she asked, would I be interested and would I be engaged to reach out to her stake presidency to have a conversation? So I did. I reached out to them. Again, waited patiently to hear back. And over the course of a couple months, they reached out to me. They reached out to me on December 23rd and invited me to sit down with them in person to open up conversations about inclusion and sensitivity training in their stake. So the appointment would have been the first or second week in January. It gets cold here in Calgary. We get as cold as -30 Celsius, which is almost -30 Fahrenheit. And it's not safe to drive, it's not safe to travel. So they decided that morning that no one was going to travel, that we would do the conversation over by Zoom. In the meantime, I had approached the bishop of this mum's ward and asked if their ward would be interested in having a conversation. So between the stake and the ward had decided that it would be appropriate to invite me to do a fireside for their ward. Again, on a very cold night, but we were braver Canadians and we faced the cold and made our way to the chapel. So it was a Sunday night fireside, and majority of the members coming to the fireside were over 50. And the other part is majority of them were temple workers that I had recognized during my temple service and my time as a patron at the temple. And I wasn't nervous, but I wasn't sure how they would react to the fireside. But similar to your audience now, they felt comfortable having me share my thoughts and the work that I've been able to do and the outreach that I had with other stakes, wards, and leaders. One of the couples attending the fireside were grandparents, and they had reached. I spoke to them after the fireside, and they said they came because their grandson had opened up to them, had come out to them, but he has never felt comfortable talking or coming out to his parents or his siblings and what to do because they felt that his parents, their kids, would be a safe spot to land, but he needed the reassurance and some guidance on how to come out. And during all my advocacy work, I've written a number of what I call my articles or essays talking about specific subject matters within advocacy conversations of inclusion. So I've written things about being a celibate member, entitled Living a Celibate Life, which talks about what it's like to be celibate, coming out, how, when, and a positive approach on coming out. One is called We All Belong in the Gospel of Jesus Christ, meaning that as much as it seems hard to participate in church and to feel involved, the Lord has a purpose for you. It may not be a calling, but your presence, your voice, your contributions are viewed by people that you don't know are watching you. I had an experience when I had first joined the church where I got an email from someone from my ward who I didn't know at all. And she had said, I've been watching you for the last year and a half. And it was sort of both disturbing and rewarding. Because again, if you have someone saying they've been observing you for a year and a half without actually introducing themselves to you, it's kind of weird. But her comment was, I know that you're new to the gospel. I know that it's all fresh to you. But it was pleasantly surprising to see how engaged and how involved you wanted to be. And you took it upon yourself to get involved, to participate. And that's what I do now, is I find opportunities to get involved, to reach out, and to make a difference. Last summer, I had again, Facebook friend who I can call a friend, who had said, my stake president would be interested in having a chat with you, either by email or over the phone. Would you be open to talking to him? And as a result of only a couple of weeks, the stake president felt comfortable to invite me to do a Zoom call with his bishops and do bishops training in, where is it? It's in Wisconsin, an area where I don't have a lot of connections, but this friend felt it was important to help his local leaders learn and understand what the conversation is for queer members of the church. So we met. Again, they came prepared. They asked some challenging questions, such as a bishop, how do I counsel a teenager, a young man or young woman who's come out to me who wants to know if there's a place for them and what they need to do in order to remain active. So, with the church handbook being available and visible to all members of the church, there's some hard things for a youth to understand, such as law of chastity and as someone on the spectrum to remain celibate, because according to church doctrine and policy, anything outside of a heterosexual marriage or relationship is deemed invalid, that it's not acceptable behavior, and that in order to enjoy the rights and privileges of church membership, you cannot have a relationship like that. And that's one thing that I reluctantly agreed to 22 years ago. It's not easy being single. It's not easy being celibate. The difference between being chaste and celibate is to be celibate, you agree not to look for a partner of the same gender or genders that feel appropriate to you, that don't fall in line with church doctrine and church policy. Recently, I came out to my temple shift coordinator. I told him that I've been obedient for the last 22 years, that it's hard being celibate, it's hard being single. And I asked him a simple question. How long did it take you and your wife to make the first move, to introduce yourself to one another? And how long between dating and getting married did it take? And he said, well, it went pretty quick. I introduced myself to my potential wife. We dated for about a month, and then we got married. And I asked him, how would your life be different if you didn't meet her or you didn't marry in this lifetime? That you didn't have any kids or grandkids, and that you led your life as someone solo, someone single, having to do everything on your own, be responsible for your own wellness and being, and to make decisions on your own, and to unfortunately not have someone that you could call your loved one, someone you could say I love you to on a daily basis. And it was a bit of a jarring moment for him. And I said, well, that's what I've been going through for the last 22 years and longer, because my last relationship was when I was 26. So since then, I've been single. And having joined the church, I've been celibate. I indicated that it's hard, that I would like to start dating, and that dating is not going to be fast, and that it's not going to be as quick as next week, letting him know that I found someone to date and that I might get married within the year. I told him it'll be a couple of years. You and I are the same age. I turn 65 in 10 days from now, which makes me laugh all the time. So to date in your 60s is hard because your dating pool is there, but it's small. And as far as getting yourself out there socially, you have to be really creative to find either events or things that will bring you in contact with other singles, whether those singles are in their 50s or in their 60s. So for the last couple months, I've been putting myself out there. Not successful, but I've been trying. So with this thought, if I were to meet someone, if I were to date, I would be open with my bishop. I would be open with my stake president. I know that my rights and privileges as a temple worker, as a church leader, as someone with callings will be restricted. I know that I wouldn't be able to pray at church. I would not be able to comment at church. I could attend church. I wouldn't be able to take the sacrament if I were to date and eventually get married. So I know that going in, but I'm willing to do that. I know that there's someone out there for me. I just haven't found them. I haven't been in a situation where I've been able to meet anyone because I've kept myself mostly within our church community. I still have friends outside of the church, but there's not a lot of them. There's a lot of people that I work with as far as clients and circles that are beyond church, but there's very few opportunities within that group to meet someone to date, to spend time with, and to share good times and bad times, to be able to face life together. So that's one thing that I've been thinking about a lot. And like I said, I would rather be upfront and open with church leaders versus them finding out secondhand that Jerry's dating and that Jerry hasn't told anyone. And that just makes me nervous to be ducking and covering if I were to be dating. So that's a little bit about how honest I am with members of the church and members in leadership. So do you have any questions, Richard, about what's happened in the last 8 years since we've sat down?
Oh, it's just great to get an update from you, Jerry. You're inspiring. You're thoughtful, you're full of integrity and goodness, and I wrote down a lot of notes. The first question I have for you is just how would listeners contact you if they want you to help them do advocacy work in their area?
Okay. As far as listeners, most have reached out to me through Facebook or Instagram. Both accounts are public, so they can easily find me, or through the ministering group on Facebook that you host. They can contact me, and I am willing to reach out to their local leaders. And like I said, depending on the area, because some areas are obedient and they only let members within their own stake and boundaries talk about advocacy. Others not so much ignore that rule, but they know the importance of having a real life resource to be able to contact and speak to. In the show notes, you can easily add in my email, and my cell phone number and my tablet is always on, so it's easy to reach me. And when airfares drop, because right now between flying to Utah right now is $1,400 Canadian,
Wow.
regardless of whether you're flying for a day or you're staying for 3 months, depending on if Trump will let us stay. So once it drops under $900, I'll be in Utah once again. So, but no, I'm willing to speak with leaders either by email or Zoom, and I'm easy to contact both through Facebook and Instagram. So there you go.
In the show notes, we will just, I've made a list here as we've been talking. I'll put episode 41, if you want to hear Jerry's episode from 8 years ago. I'll put the ministering group. It's a Facebook group that's just ministering resources. It has a files tabs. There's lots of documents that people have put together. Jerry's a very active member of that group. It's supportive of the church, but it's just trying to bring community all over the world of everybody that's just trying to bring resources. It's not focused by if you're an ally, if you're LGBTQ. It's focused by purpose, supporting LGBTQ Latter-day Saints. There's allies in there, there's local leaders, and there's LGBTQ folk. And we'll put Jerry's contact information, Facebook, Instagram, email. Just some of the things that I wrote down. I love this line, you may only get one chance to get it right. If you're a local leader and somebody comes out to you, and I was a YSA bishop and no one had ever done for me what Jerry Chong is doing for so many others. I'd never been to the sensitivity training. I never had any training on this. And one day, a young man with great courage comes out to me as gay. This is 2013, 2014. And I'm not sure I got it right because I had no training. I did feel impressed to go slow and not provide many answers and just recognize his courage for coming out. And then that helped me try to get to resources. But I love this idea of getting it right. I love this idea of being prepared for conversations that we may have in the future. So the work that Jerry's doing, tell me about these essays. You mentioned several essays. Can we put those in the show notes? Are those something that we could put in the show notes? Because I would love to potentially for readers to listen to those or read those.
We can include them in the show notes. A lot of our followers in the ministering group have asked for access to the essays. And generally what I do is I ask them to send me their email address because they are 2-page essays, single space, tight, precise conversations. and it's easier for them to read it by email and have the whole essay or essays, because in some cases, well, I've written 5 or 6 essays that are pertinent to this conversation, and they've been helpful. It's been helpful for them, and I always reassure people that they are free to share these essays, articles with people that will benefit, whether it's another parent, whether it's a youth, again, with permission, because it is pretty raw. It's pretty honest in dealing with situations. But yeah, we'll figure out how to create a link to that. One thing about coming out, and for church leaders, is that's one of the questions I've asked stake presidents and bishops. Has anyone, while you've been in a leader in any capacity, has anyone come out to you? And most say no. I rarely get a bishop or a stake president who says a youth or an adult has trusted me to come out to them. So that's the first thing, is if the individual, whether they're 14 or 45, if they feel they can trust you and can be honest with you, they will come out to you. And they've been thinking about coming out to you for years. It takes a lot of courage to come out because you don't know how people are going to react, whether they're going to dismiss you or whether they're going to listen to you. One of the things you never do as a leader or as a friend when someone comes out to you is ask, are you sure? You've been thinking about it as early as 8 years old. And to ask someone who's 45, are you sure that you are LGBTQ? They've had their entire life to know that they're different. And for some people, it only takes a short time to understand who they are. Others, it takes decades to understand and accept who they are. So when you're meeting with someone from church and they ask that question, are you sure? It's a little insulting because generally you know who you are, and to question your understanding of yourself is puzzling. So that's the first question. And for the most part, your role as a friend and as a leader is to listen and then ask, what do you find both positive or negative at church? That was the best question my friend and previous stake president Colin Steele had asked me in a one-on-one conversation. He said, do you enjoy going to church? What's the best thing and what's the worst thing about participating in church? And we talked about it. We talked about the level of homophobia from church and from church members and church friends. This, unfortunately, is an ugly story. I've been close friends with a husband and wife couple, the daughter of my first stake president. My first stake president in 2004 really wanted me to meet his family. So eventually, a number of years later, I met his daughter and her husband together once a week for over 14 years. And it took that long for me to realize how homophobic the wife was, how hard she was on me in person. And I put up with it because I felt that I couldn't speak up to her. And this is a hard conversation for both your listeners and for me to talk about. I wrote the husband a letter saying, I'm going to name names, I'm sorry. Dave, I can't be your friend because I can't be your wife's friend. She has hurt me for so long. We've been, quote, friends for 14 years, and it's been painful being your friend because I have to hold back my honesty. I can't be myself. I have to pretend to be someone that I'm not. He took a couple days to read through it and process it. It unfortunately didn't hit home with him. He said, I understand, but can I be your friend? It's like, well, seeing you reminds me so much about your wife. There's no separating how I feel about your wife and how I feel about you because you will not speak up to her in my presence when she has been so cruel to me. So with that, I can't be your friend. He really wanted to continue friendship. So we met for lunch, but I had to pretend that that I didn't send the email, that I don't have these feelings, and then came home, wrote him another letter and said, Dave, what we just went through is not being honest. I'm pretending to be your friend only because you want me to be. You don't understand how hard it's been. So I need to leave this situation. I cannot be your friend. He still is a high counselor in our stake. It's awkward being around them. I've actually left church because he came to speak as a high counselor, partly for my own protection, to keep myself safe, that the hardest thing at church is breaking down and crying and having other people see that you're being hurt and them asking why. So I quietly stepped out of sacrament, went home, and a few people noticed. Some people reached out and said, what happened? We saw that you got up and left. And I'm very fortunate in my Mandarin ward that I can be honest and open with people. I told them what had happened over that time period and where I stand now, and how unsafe I feel around people that have those homophobic feelings towards people in general society, let alone members of the church. So that's a tough one. Other things I talk about is being celibate, what it takes, how hard it is. We are asked not to find a companion in this lifetime. And I still have doubts that I might find a companion in this lifetime. And again, I'm not trying to be dark, but my parents lived till they're 80. I've got 15 years to find someone to call my own, someone to say I love you too. And like I said previously, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of effort, a number of years. I'll be closer to 70 before I find someone who, but again, I look forward to dating. I look forward to spending time together with someone. But no other group in our church society is asked to not find a companion, to not say I love you to someone. So that's one of the things that we on the spectrum are asked to do, is to remain single, remain celibate, not to date, not to show any interests, not to voice any interests, to keep it to ourselves. And then I talk about coming out in as a specific essay, that it's a lifetime process. You don't come out once, you come out for the rest of your life. I first came out when I was 19 in university. I came out to new college friends because they'd asked, what did you do over the weekend? And then eventually felt comfortable that I went to a gay bar. And again, my friend's first reaction was, are you serious? She didn't believe me. And I reassured her that I did and that I'm telling the truth. So I've been coming out since I was 19. I've been coming out for 45 years, 46 years. And for me, I've been fortunate in that I've always had a positive experience when I came out. I trusted my gut instinct before I joined the church. I trust the Spirit to tell me who's prepared to listen if I decide to come out to them. Something that may be surprising to your listeners and people in the ministering group is that I come out to fellow temple workers. I've come out to all my temple presidents. One temple president didn't see it coming. He saw me at state conference sitting beside a single sister, thinking that I was dating her as well. Nope, I'm not straight. I'm definitely gay. And he respected me being that honest with him, even in the temple. And with that, he had asked, what can I do as the temple president to help you? And I said, well, you're in top leadership in Calgary. If you can put in a good word or referral to, and again, this was quite a few years ago, so there's still a few stake presidents that I hadn't been able to reach out to. If you're able to put in a good word for me, it'll make a difference. And he did. And it did. And I was able to move the conversation along. Within the church, upper level, Elder Gary Stevenson had spoken to our area being southern Alberta, Idaho, and parts of Utah. He had done a Zoom call during COVID to stake presidents, mission presidents, and temple presidents. And he was actually in Calgary with that meeting. So he had met with our leadership in person and everyone else by broadcast over Zoom. And his message was for church leaders to reach out to LGBTQ members within their congregations and within their wards and branches and make a proactive effort to reach out to them, remind them and reassure them that there's a place here in the gospel for them and that Heavenly Father loves them. That is the sweetest message I've ever heard from an apostle. And that's just a reassurance that we do have a place. We may not hear it publicly, we may not hear it personally, but I truly feel that that is something that Heavenly Father and the Savior and our leadership in the church know and are moving forward based off of their comfort zone of being able to share that message openly within our congregations. What else have I talked about? And I've talked about the advocate within. So this was early back in 2005 or 2006 that I wrote this essay about feeling the promptings to speak up, to make a difference, to know that through one person, a lot can happen. A lot of my early work as an advocate came from the sisters within our congregations. I got introduced to a lot of Stake Relief Society presidents as a result of mutual friends who had personal friends who were in leadership in other wards and stakes. So my advice to those who are on the spectrum or those who want to be an ally, reach out to someone locally, someone within your ward. They don't need to be your bishop. They could be your young woman's president or counselor. It could be someone in Relief Society. It could be your mission leader. If you feel that you can be open and honest with these people, they may take your request on building a safer community up the chain to their bishop if you're not comfortable speaking openly to your bishop or to your stake president. Speaking with leadership can be intimidating, but again, we are asked to be honest with our dealings with other members of the church, community, and our families. So who more could you be more honest with than your bishop or your stake president, aside from sitting down with our prophet? And some people do have that ability to sit down with the prophet. I haven't had that ability or that chance yet. I'm still waiting. So those are some of the things that I cover and some of the things that I actively share with people. One last story which will be very impactful currently. So back in August 2024, the church handbook had updated their policies on trans and non-binary members or potential members. I had heard about it, but I didn't get a chance to read it. It took me a couple months, to be honest. It took me nearly 6 months to sit down, read it, and see what I could do. So going back to 2024, I had within the church community very few trans or non-binary friends that I could actually talk to firsthand to understand their experience. So within the ministering group and through Facebook, I found 2 people willing to sit down with me over video conversation. I asked them about the church update, how it's affected them, how it's affected their participation, and where they are at on their personal journey being their true self. One person is non-binary and is presenting themselves as non-binary, which spooks church leaders and church members because it's all new to them. They don't understand. The other is considering transitioning, but again, you take it slowly, you take it at your own pace, and you move forward when you are comfortable. I have a friend and client, a design client, who came out to me 5 years ago. Her 2 boys were, quote, my clients as well when they're 6 and 7. Between the 2 boys and their mutual ensuite bathroom, they had 900 square feet of house to themselves. So that's sort of gives you an idea. So the mom and friend had come out to me 5 years ago and said that their son had come out as being trans and she didn't know how to handle it and she didn't understand. And having been in the advocacy pool for the last 6 years. We talked about it. I encouraged her to use her trans daughter's new pronouns and new name, because she, even in the conversation with me, that when she opened up, she would still refer to her son as her son and by her son's birth name versus preferred pronouns of she, her, and preferred personal name. So gently coaxing her and encouraging her to use those names and pronouns. She eventually got more comfortable, but it was a journey for her. She talked about her son going to therapy, going for medical and transition help, and what it takes time-wise, money-wise, and commitment to therapy before even considering a medical transition from male to female or female to male. So it's not simple. It's a long journey, lots of money, and time and energy invested. Similarly, the two new friends that I had a video conversation shared the same, essentially the same detail, but they also talked about, as a trans or non-binary person, they can no longer be working with the youth of the church, whether it's primary or young men, young women's, even though they had that calling prior to the church handbook update. As far as bathrooms, most chapels don't have single-use person bathrooms. Most of them are bathrooms with one or two bathroom stalls that are open, that cannot be locked. So most trans and non-binary people don't, if you have to go to the bathroom, you leave church and you just go elsewhere. You can't go to church, can't use the washrooms at church. As far as being visible, depending on your ward or stake, you can or cannot. If you socially transition, meaning you use a new name and use your preferred pronouns or pronouns that are appropriate to your gender identity and your personal identity, it may be frowned upon. It all depends on your ward and stake. So there's a lot of do not that are in the policy that most church leaders and church members are not aware of. And for me, it was an eye-opener as well, because again, like I said, it took me a long time to read through because I physically did not have the physical time to put the effort in. So I wrote an essay, or essentially an information article defining what trans or non-binary means, what their commitment to how to truly find their identity for themselves. They're not doing it for you, they're doing it for themselves. They're trying to find peace within their body and within their mind by discovering and exploring what makes them comfortable. Because if you're not comfortable in your body or your mind or in amongst a group of people, you're not going to be comfortable. And it's a huge step for them to be brave enough to both present who they are, speak about who they are, and to be open. It's like everyone else on the spectrum. It takes time to come out. It takes time to find the courage. So I wrote and summarized all the terminology, all the things that are allowed, what are not allowed at church. During the Nativity pageant in our stake for the city, our stake was hosting it at our building in the parking lot. Closing at night, our stake president was there every night of the presentation, and again, he's glad handing hundreds of people that are visiting from other stakes and members within the stake that are participating in the pageant. But the last night, I felt it was important to try to get literally 3 minutes of his time and speak to him. I had spoken to a Relief Society presidency member about trans and non-binary, and I asked her, do you feel as a stake leader now and a stake leader in the past as in the Relief Society presidency to bring this subject up? Because there are people within our stake and many people within our church community where this church policy is devastating, has made a horrible impact on their life. And she said, yes, I think you should, if you get a moment tonight, ask for a few minutes of his time Be brief, be precise, and I'm sure he'll be open to listening to you. So here we are trying to pack up the building, trying to pack up props and costumes and the whole bit. And I my stake president in the hall for one of the few moments where he's not talking to someone, and approach him and ask him, can I have 3 minutes of your time? And opened up that I've been thinking about this for a long time. In our meeting with you and the Stake Relief Society presidency for the first advocacy meeting with you as stake president, I was only allowed 20 minutes. I didn't share a lot. I more or less asked you questions about, has anyone come out to you? Do you know anything about trans and non-binary people or trans and non-binary members? And all 6 of you answered, no, we don't know anyone in the trans and non-binary community, and no one's ever come out to us. And told him that I was compiling an information essay, and would it be appropriate to send it to you when it's ready in the new year? He said he would appreciate that because we don't have any information, and from what I've read, I don't understand it. So he's read the policy, not necessarily to the depth that he could, but he said he would appreciate the help. So I sent it to him in the new year, and then I asked, would it be appropriate and do I have permission to send it to the Stake Relief Society presidency? And he said, by all means. So I reached out to the stake president. He thanked me for sending it. That's been very helpful and useful in understanding, and that they would put it into action as appropriate within the stake. I reached out to book a phone call with the Stake Relief Society president and asked, have you had a chance to read it? So she said she's read it, and then she gave me an appointment time. And we live in a different time where you have to make an appointment to make a phone call, which I find strange because growing up, we just called people up. We didn't have to make an appointment. So I kept my appointment, called her up, asked her about her response, her thoughts about the essay article, and she was not open or receptive. She actually thought I was being a radical, even though I serve in the temple, even though I hold a church calling, that I'm in leadership at the Mandarin Ward. She still felt that she couldn't trust me after serving and volunteering in the stake over the last 2 or 3 years, as I've got to know her both as a friend from church and a fellow Latter-day Saint. So that was quite surprising, and that was also quite disappointing that she would feel unsafe with me, that I cannot be trusted. And similarly, like I said before, some leaders aren't prepared, that the Lord still needs to work and assist them in being prepared to listen and to be compassionate and empathetic. So, and it's been a year and a bit, and it's still awkward seeing her and her counselors at church or at state conference. Like, I'm pleasant, but I'm not engaged in speaking with any of them because I know they're not interested. The Stake Relief Society president actually knows a mom who has a trans daughter, does not acknowledge the importance of inclusion, does not acknowledge how difficult it can be to be a member of the church, regardless of where you sit on the spectrum. Even with our straight members, it's hard being a member of the church. So I try to be a diplomat. I try to be, as I say, a big boy and be kinder, but it's hard when you know that there's no acceptance or understanding by someone who's been called to be understanding, And I'm not here to criticize, but again, as a mom, your wife is a mom. I'm sure she loves your kids. I'm sure she loves your kids' friends. I'm sure her outreach to kids, young, old, and older, is safe. So it's disappointing that someone who's been called to watch over the sisters and the mums of a congregation or of a stake doesn't find it important. We're all important. And that's one of the things that has kept me here, is knowing that God loves me. I'm important in his life, that through my obedience and through my service, I will be with God in the eternity. And that's one thing that we as queer folks question. Is there a place for us in heaven with Heavenly Father and the Savior? And I unquestionably say yes, there is. There may be people that speak on behalf of God, but I know in my heart that He loves me, He loves you, He loves your kids, and that there's place for us. And if we keep that in mind, and as we pray and speak to our Heavenly Father, He'll reassure us that there is place for us and that there is purpose for us. So those are some of the things that have happened in the last 8 years. That's some of the impact that I've made. I continue to strive to make a difference. My concern right now is our teenagers, that if we can create a safe space, both in our broader community, in society in general, in amongst our politics and through church, that we will have a next generation of leaders, both straight and queer, within our church community and in our broader community. And that we can talk openly about hard things, but we can also talk about the positive things like marriage equality. Who are you dating? What is he or she like? And not to be afraid to be that open and honest. So those are some of my thoughts, Richard. And those are some of my thoughts to you, my listeners. And like I said before, if you would like to reach out to me, I'm easily able to be contacted by. So there you go.
Thank you, Jerry. Just thank you on behalf of all of our listeners, all the people you've helped, for the man you are and the work you're doing. And a couple closing thoughts as Jerry's been sharing. First thought is just one of the things Jerry is role modeling is healthy boundaries, which we all need to do, but those specific examples are great. And I love that you shared them on the podcast with names, and you've just had to develop boundaries as a gay Latter-day Saint where situations are not healthy for you. And whether that's walking out of a church talk or ending a relationship, I just think that's part of being a thoughtful human being and developing boundaries. That doesn't mean we're not compassionate, we're not honoring our baptism covenants. So I love that. I loved your line when you got baptized that I reluctantly agreed to be celibate. I just chuckled a little bit like that with that. And in the show notes, I'll link to a Substack that I started. An article in there is just, does the proclamation of the family answer the question for gay and lesbian Latter-day Saints who feel a mixed orientation marriage is not their path? So that would be celibate Latter-day Saints like Jerry, or those that feel a same-sex marriage. And I'm not going to discuss that here, but Jerry had a real thoughtful comment on my Facebook post about that. It's just the sacrifice he's making that straight Latter-day Saints don't make. And I love that conversation you had with your shift coordinator in the temple. And part of that is just all of us as allies becoming uncomfortable. Part of growth that I felt is being uncomfortable listening to LGBTQ Latter-day Saints stories. I loved you bringing up that you're dating and that you want to date and you potentially want to find a partner and get married. How do I process as an ally? I just love Jerry. I just trust Jerry to figure out his best future. I am not Jerry's judge. I'm Jerry's supporter. I'll walk with Jerry on any road that he feels is best for him. I'm not going to make him the hero one day for being 22 plus years celibate in the church. And if he ends up in a same-sex marriage, I'm not going to make him the villain next day. I'm just going to say, I'm going to love Jerry. I'm going to honor his personal revelation. I'm not going to tell Jerry how to live his life. I'm going to tell Jerry, I trust you. I'll walk with you. I won't, and I'll just leave any judgment to our Savior and his perfect understanding. And I recognize this double bind you're in where you'd love to fully participate in the church and continue being an advocate and speak and be in the temple. You've had all these leadership callings and you love to share your life with somebody. As a 65-year-old, we're the same age. And, I'm grateful to share my life with somebody, listeners. And there's so many things in our marriage that I think of what it would be like to be single. We go to the doctor now and we take care of each other. We have our surgeries and we come home and process things together. And marriage is so much more than sexual intimacy. Sometimes we define this, we just look at this as this is all about sex. And healthy marriages aren't just about sexual intimacy. They're about companionship and sharing things. And one of the things I've noticed with some of my gay Latter-day Saint friends is they'll just message me what's going on in their life. And I'm always glad to get those messages, listeners, but sometimes I realize they don't have anybody else to tell. They don't have someone to go home to after their day of advocacy work and say, this is how it went. This is what I did, or a difficult experience. And I mourn for that. I mourn. A single straight person has hope and can pray every night they'll fall in love. And Jerry, is praying every night that he won't fall in love. And now he's praying a little differently, but it's just different. And I hope we have the intellectual maturity to recognize Jerry's life is different than a straight Latter-day Saint who's single. So I just love you, Jerry, and I love your honesty and your integrity, and you'll be honest about that. And I pray you'll find somebody. I think you're and you're going slow and thoughtful. So my first reaction, listeners, when Jerry says, I'd like to find someone, was, I'll pray that you find that person. If that's the hope in your heart, my prayers will align with the hope in your heart versus any agenda I have for you. And I'll just trust you and I'll walk with you. And I love then you pivoting to a group of Latter-day Saints that you're not a part of, trans and non-binary, and you've chosen to be an ally and an advocate for them. And that's just who you are in your advocacy. It extends beyond your own personal story as a gay Latter-day Saint, what you did is said, I got to learn about this group of people. So you went and met with non-binary and trans people, and you role modeled listening and willing to be learned and not be informed by loud political voices that have marginalized this group of people and used this as a fear-mongering political wedge to gain votes and to marginalize a group of people. And that's a really complicated space. And there's a lot of people in our church that are informed by loud political voices versus the actual people walking this road. So I just love that. I'm just going through my notes here. I sometimes call what Jerry's doing the shadow service, because Jerry has LDS callings. If you go into his LDS tools, if you're in his stake, it probably says temple worker and what you do. But then you have what I call the shadow service, all this work you're doing that doesn't show up on LDS tools. And these phone calls with stake presence in the UK, and I wrote down the word patience, how patient you are. Sometimes that these appointments take a year or something to happen, but it's a beautiful shadow service that you're doing. And 7 of 8 stakes in Calgary. I just admire that so much for what you're doing and how you're role modeling advocacy and patience, and that you're doing such a great job of making a difference. I thought of Ben Shalati and Tom Christofferson, 2 other celibate Latter-day Saints that have done so much, and many others that are doing it in a more quiet way. Everybody's called to do this space. I love the idea of creating your advice to bishops for their ward and how to counsel LGBTQ. And one of the things I said to a new bishop who came over and visited with me, I said to him, in a word conference talk, or you might actually just say, how you'll handle situations. So you might even say, if you're in a tough spot in your marriage, come talk to me. I'm not a marriage counselor, but I want to be a safe person for you. If you're going through a faith crisis, this is how I'll respond. I'll respond, I love you. I'll listen to you. I won't preach to you. If you're working through word of wisdom or pornography issues or want to talk to me about worthiness issues, this is how I respond. And if you're LGBTQ, which isn't a worthiness issue, isn't a choice, if you want to talk to me about not being straight, this is how I respond. And so you can role model that as a local leader or as a parent and take the anxiety out of your people that are in your circle of stewardship and actually say how you'll respond to them about the issue. They may be wondering if you're a safe person. So that's just some advice consistent with what Jerry has said. In the show notes, we will put Jerry's email. I think the best thing is to email Jerry. I'd love for you to develop some conversation with Jerry versus just putting his essays in the show notes. So if you want his essays that he's kind of given an overview of in that last segment of the podcast, email Jerry. His email will be in the show notes. And then he'll send you the essays, and you can start a dialogue with Jerry if you'd like to. He's a great resource. And I sense he still wants to be a resource and has the emotional capital and desire to do that. And I'm just so admire you for willing to do that. And someday I think God's going to take you to a top of a mountain. Maybe that's the next life, or maybe you get a glimpse of that in this life, and just let you see what you've done, Jerry, that is largely unseen by our faith community, because so many of our faith community don't even want to talk about this issue or see there's a problem. So I'm so grateful for what you've done. You're one of my heroes, and you'll always be one of my heroes. And you've helped me so much as an ally when I first started to listen to you. Way back when I became ally, you're one of the very best and helpful people for me. Anything you'd like to say in closure to our listeners?
Well, here's my connection to Utah. And again, most of your listeners may be familiar with the group Mama Dragon. I've been involved with them for such a long time that I consider myself a honorary Mama Dragon, even though I have kids, but I do consider your kids my kids as well. They put out an effort, and they continue to put out an effort with a program called Embracelets, which are woven or handmade friendship bracelets given out to queer youth at different events. And here's my humble brag. In the last year and a half, I have braided over 1,600 bracelets and sent them down to Utah with friends who were driving through Utah or staying as far south as St. George. So I'm going to give a couple shout outs. Joe Mortensen from St. George has handed them out in Circle there, as well as Pride of Southern Utah. A new friend who's involved with the Belong Youth Conference. I had proactively reached out to them about the conference and sending them bracelets. So I sent a couple hundred for their conference this year. And then my friend Rebecca Watson, who's with Free Mom Hugs, she sent me a video last summer as she was speaking at one of the events and gave me a shout out. And I encouraged her to let the kids know and the parents know that imagine your grandfather madly braiding all these bracelets and sending them across the border. That's how much I love them. So that's the other effort that I've done, is to reach out to teens and young adults who I may not meet in this lifetime, to reassure them that someone as old as me and you are working hard and diligently to make the efforts to make it safe to see them, to help them feel loved by someone who has their back, who may not meet them in this lifetime, but know that I'm here for you and that I will continue madly braiding bracelets and sending them across the border. Shauna, I think it's Shauna Jones, through Mama Dragon, they also do handmade quilts. So I am sending her through a friend who's traveling in the US by driving, a handmade quilt for her to give to her friend who has a trans daughter as a gift of love and a gift of appreciation. So those are some of the closing thoughts and some of the closing efforts that I continue to do as an older person. My pronouns are he, him, and sir, because I've been called sir since I was 35. So I hope you enjoy the humor of my life and my thought, and I send you my love from Calgary. Your friend, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry. We love you. And I love those humble brags. That's a great way to frame up that. And thank you, Jerry Chong, for visiting us with us this day. We'll have to have you on the podcast again at some point. And this is Jerry Chong and Richard Ostler signing off of another episode. And please share this with others of Listen, Learn, and Love. Thank you, listeners.